Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Chip Brewster, host of WGN News Now. Thank you so much for tuning in early to join me and Paul Lisnick, political analyst at WGN here, for a little bit of pre-debate analysis. It's a big night. This is the first live debate between the two candidates for governor here in Illinois. And Paul, I know we've been talking about this, you especially in your role, for many days, if not weeks now, even if not since the primary determined that Darren Bailey was going to face off against incumbent Governor Pritzker.
Well, that's right. Look, up until now, Chip, of course, we went through the primaries and we saw Bailey beat his opponents. We saw Pritzker just walk to his nomination, but we haven't seen the two of them on the same stage until about a half hour from now. That's when they join each other. What we have been seeing, Chip, of course, tons of ads. They both have been, Pritzker's been running ads from the minute the primary was over.
Of course.
Both positive for himself and also attacking Bailey. Bailey, of course, doing his share of ads going in the other direction. But yeah, this is the first time we're going to see them confront each other. And I have no question with our own Taman Bradley and our anchor out from the Bloomington Normal area, I'm sure they're going to be asking the questions that we're all wondering about tonight.
And what exactly are some of those questions? I guess let's start, aside from the debate and Taman and the representation the journalist community has with the debate, what questions have you been waiting for to be asked as a part of this debate?
Well, look, there's been so much questioning about, for example, the Safety Act in Illinois, with Democrats saying, oh, this is so important, it gets rid of cash bail, and but certainly not for the most serious of crimes. And then you have Republicans saying that's not the way it works, and all sorts of people are going to be free. On my own show, WGN TV Political Report, I had Minority Leader Jim Durkin on, and when I said to him that very point, but Democrats say that serious offenders will still be kept with bail and all that, he said no, they won't, and that he confronted Pritzker with it, and that Pritzker didn't respond. Well, tonight, hopefully, Pritzker and Bailey will get those questions and we'll get a little more clarification about it. I think on issues like abortion, which have been driving races all around the country, Chip, we know where they stand, but I think Bailey may get a little bit of push on that because while Pritzker is as open as he can be about wanting to be sure women who choose to have an abortion can get one, for Bailey, we want to find out to what limit will he permit exceptions? Have his views changed? He has said in the past, pretty much no exceptions for rape or incest. What are his views today? And has that modified now that he's going for a top role in the state?
All right. Well, I'm sure a lot of those questions will be asked, the answers given, especially when you have the two of them next to each other. Only they know, and even in the moment, they may not know what's going to happen there.
Yeah, we're also going to hear a lot about their background. So this is a chance to learn more about these candidates. We know Pritzker very well, but people who aren't from Bailey's area may not know a lot about him. We know he's a farmer and all of that. This is a good chance, I think, for us to find out a little bit about their background. I'm sure they'll be asked about that.
I want to touch on, too, we've been talking about the build-up that we've been, not only us here at WGN, but really the state has been making towards this debate and ultimately towards the election. Well, among the elements, there are a number of polls that have been run. We, in fact, have a recent poll that I know you wanted to touch on that really shows what voter opinion is going into this debate tonight.
So when you look at the poll done by WGN, Emerson College, and The Hill, just on the question of the candidates themselves, Pritzker has a 15-point lead over Darren Bailey. Now, some would argue that's pretty insurmountable, but that's what these debates are all about, because we have it tonight, which we're airing on WGN, and then next week, on the 18th, a week from Tuesday, I think it is, we will have another debate here at the WGN studios. This is an opportunity for people all around the state, again, to solidify their own views on what's going on. But in that poll that we conducted, there were some pretty surprising results beyond the measurement of the candidates themselves and who's ahead of who, that kind of thing. Specifically, Chip, the one thing I want to point to is that when people were asked what is the most important issue in the campaign, for people watching us right now who may not know the poll results, if I asked you, what do you think the number one issue in the campaign is? What do you think they would say?
Well, I know the poll results, so you're kind of cheating the system. Okay, well, I think they would talk about, depending on where you're at in the state at least, overwhelmingly crime.
And that's what I would think, right? I would think people would say, oh, that's the number one issue for people. Yet our poll showed within the margin of error of 3%, which means these are reliable results, crime was number 4, Chip. Number 4. Beyond that was abortion, the preservation of democracy. And of course, number one was the economy. And people always vote their pocketbooks. Maybe that shouldn't be a surprise. But this notion of crime coming in number 4 to the Bailey campaign has to be a surprise because they have focused so much on that issue. And then we also asked about the Safety Act. I mentioned that earlier, where hopefully the candidates will clarify their positions. But what exactly does it do? And our WGN poll showed that the majority of people responding thought that crime will increase as a result of the Safety Act. Small percent, I think 12% said it'll decrease, and other people said crime won't change at all. But this is a really important provision that people need to, actually I think it was 12% of people said they never heard of the thing. So we're going to have to clarify that. But the fact that crime didn't play as strongly as I think Republicans would expect, and when you go beneath the numbers, and I think it's worth doing that, when you go beneath the numbers, in other words, what it is people might not know from just looking at the results of the poll, most of the support of the issue of, be it, of crime and all that comes from the rural areas of the state where Darren Bailey is from. So no surprise that the argument he's been making plays well to his base, but does it play well in Chicago and in Cook County? According to the poll, it's number 4.
Well, and there were a number of other items in the poll that really went in depth. I think this was the one, I'm sorry, I was working on getting this up as we were talking,
sure.
that you were talking about. There was some of the hot topics here. So we're starting with abortion, and that, I mean, that's been a hot topic really across the country since the Supreme Court made their decision not too long ago.
No question about it. When you look at this, if viewers are looking at that particular poll result right now, I guess it shouldn't surprise us, given the general state of Illinois, that the majority of people are saying, yes, I totally support increasing funding for abortions. But you know what I think most people don't know? I think when we talk about increasing support, that means your taxes may be going up. I could be wrong, but I'm guessing a lot of people go, well, I didn't mean that. I just meant we should support it. We want to be a welcoming state. But when I go, really, are you willing to pay more in taxes? I'm willing to bet those results may, in fact, shift significantly because people don't realize. And I think maybe when this whole abortion decision came down at the end of June, maybe people even thought that, well, this will be, it'll be a way for the state to make income from the money that would be brought in from these women coming from other states for the abortions. But that's not the way this works. They come here for the service is going to be provided, and more likely than not, it is Illinois and Illinois funding that will pay for it.
One of the questions I had, especially when it relates to polls that we're taking part in, this is pre-debate. How much do you feel a debate can actually change someone's opinion, especially as it relates to some of those topics that was covered in the recent poll?
Well, it's a great question. And by the way, I should note that WGN is going to do another poll. So when these debates are behind us, we're going to answer that very question that you're asking, which is such a good one, which is, did it make a difference? Now, look, if people who are really ingrained, those people who, love J.B. Pritzker and support him, there's very little that's going to happen tonight that's going to change their view. The same for those who don't like Pritzker, and the same for those who like and don't like Bailey. So really what this is all about are those people in the middle, perhaps some independents, perhaps those people who are on the fence, who basically say, I'm listening. I'm watching this debate because I need to listen to what their views are. They would describe themselves independent. I could go either way here. That's who we're going after. That's not a lot of people. When we did the poll numbers in this last exercise, 42% of the respondents described themselves or identified as Democrats, not 90%. And I think, and you know this, Chip, when people think of how blue is Illinois and we think of, it's just such a blue state, people need to understand, and sometimes on my show I'll put a map up of Illinois. I don't know if we have that, but the map.
Not ready with that one.
No worries. So the map, but you don't have to be, because if you just put a blotch of red up in the shape of the state of Illinois, that's what Illinois looks like. It is a very, very red state. It is, some viewers might be saying, except for 2 areas. There's an area downstate, Montgomery County, and there's an area, of course, Chicago and Cook County. Those are the blue parts of the state, and those are the areas of the state which are enough and sufficient to carry certainly statewide races to go in the direction of Democrats.
That density of population.
Exactly right.
You just can't get around that. But there has been an election of a Republican governor in the not too distant past within the state. Now,
but wait a minute. But who was Bruce Rauner? He wasn't. He played like the good old. I'm the good old boy. Whatever. He's a sharp businessman who owns tons of businesses, tons of home. On the Republican side of things, he fit right in from Darren Bailey. Very.
So, and that's exactly the point that I was going to make here, is because Darren Bailey, as a Republican, is not like the one that this state has elected in the past. In fact, there were several reports out that the Democratic side of the country, if you will, that machine, pushed to get him into that spot, that candidate spot, because of one name and one name only. You know it. Donald Trump.
Right. Look, they can deny it as much as they want, but the bottom line is, if you were J.B. Pritzker, you did want to run against Darren Bailey. Now, look, sometimes it's be careful what you wish for, because you can get bitten by what you do. But this is the kind of effort that was made by Democrats, you're right, around the country to put all of these Trump election deniers in the Republican nominee slot, the thought being, we're going to beat them all. Well, that's not going to happen. I'll tell you that. That is not going to happen. We'll see what does happen. It is a tougher road for Bailey in this state. But by the way, when you think back to the fact that we had Bruce Rauner, and most people have him in their memory, but you know what? Go back a little further. We had Republican Governor Jim Edgar, very moderate Republican. We had Republican Governor George Ryan, former Secretary of State, but also he's from Kankakee. So, I don't know, is Kankakee rural, urban? I'm not sure how we might describe it. Maybe it's kind of a hybrid.
Well, now, see, that goes back to where in the state are you, and that's how you would answer that question,
Exactly.
I'm sure.
But both of them got elected. That's my point. And so, therefore, yes, certainly this state is absolutely open to putting Republicans in office. We've had Republican attorney generals. I mean, we have done it. We had a Republican controller in the form of the incredibly popular Treasurer Judy Bar Topinka. So this state will elect Republicans, but it's very tough for them to elect a Republican, or for a Republican to win, who doesn't have a moderate view, who isn't sort of almost progressive in their viewpoint of life. They are Republican. Usually in this state means they're Republican and conservative when it comes to fiscal or economic policy, but not when it comes to social issues. And that's Darren Bailey's issue, is that he's also very conservative when it comes to the social issues like abortion. Pritzker's been running an ad lately, too, where he goes after Bailey, basically saying LGBTQ people should have no extra rights, somehow comparing them to other groups of horrendous people and stuff. So that's a very dangerous thing, and I think Pritzker's probably smart to put that out there, because in this state, we are generally an accepting state on social issues.
Now, we talk a lot about Darren Bailey and the Pritzker's pros a little bit. How about some of the negatives going into this race? What are the Republicans latching onto and trying to exploit as best they can with our Democratic incumbent governor?
Yeah, well, look, J.B. Pritzker is in decent shape. I mean, some of the arguments have to do, look at the terrible fiscal shape we're in. The thing is, it was in horrendous shape before he took office. And Pritzker, I'm sure we'll hear about this tonight, he can turn things around. He has turned things around in terms of our credit ratings have gotten significant bumps up, whereas under the Rauner administration, they've been bumped down 6 times. Now there have been several upticks in the credit rating. And so in many ways, the taxes are not going up. I mean, there's a lot that Pritzker can tout about how he's handled the fiscal relationship of the state, fiscal situation. And by the way, even in the unpaid bills, back in 2017, we had $16.7 billion in unpaid bills. Now, some of that credit has to go to the controller. And by the way, the controller candidates are on my WGN TV political report show this weekend, Sunday morning at 9, if I can throw that in.
Every chance you get, Paul.
Every chance I talk about it. But the bottom line is that, that backlog of bills has been brought way down with new policies ensuring bills get paid. So even that, there's a lot of room and improvement to go. But, Pritzker has done a decent job. You may not like his policies. I'm not judging, his overall policies and things, but how he's handled the fiscal nature of the state, in many ways, it's what a business person would do to get things more under control than they were.
Paul, you know how much fun I like to have with you, just chatting through politics and whatnot. But
Can we have a friend join us?
I feel like we should have a friend join us. I feel like we can up this discussion, this analysis a little bit more in the 15 minutes we have left before we get into the debate. And so to do that, we will now be joined by Mr. Stephen Caliendo, professor of political science at North Central College. Mr. Caliendo, how are you this evening? Excited?
I'm glad to be a friend. Glad to be a friend and be here.
Stephen and I have this battle going on because he often wears bow ties as I do. And every time I'm going to be with him, sometimes I'll give it to him. So tonight I put a tie on so that my dear friend Stephen would feel comfortable with his bow tie. You did it to me again. You went to, we're great minds think alike.
Yeah, but I didn't notice in the note that you sent me earlier in the week that you invited the bow tie, but I didn't see that until today. And I already had the necktie on at that point.
Well,
so
Chip played it smart.
Better next time.
Notice Chip played it smart. No ties.
This is my typical wear, although I did bring a red tie to balance it out, as you guys did as well. So actually kind of happy that I forgot to put it on.
Well, by the way, mine's pink. But
okay, enough about tie analysis. Let's talk about debate analysis. So, Stephen, I imagine as a professor of political sciences and a dean there at the college, you have been watching this candidacy intensely from even before we had Darren Bailey identified as a Republican candidate. What are you looking for out of tonight's first live debate with these two sharing the same stage?
Fireworks. There's going to be some fireworks. If last week was any indication, the non-televised forum, there's going to be some fireworks. Look, I agree with Paul to a great extent in terms of the fact that there's not a lot of undecideds necessarily. Some of them will be tuning in to see what happens. But one of the things that political scientists have known for some time is that what matters more than actually the debate is media coverage of the debate afterwards. And so how are we talking about the debate in the next couple of days or in the days between this debate and the next one? That matters. The other thing that's important to remember is it's not always about convincing somebody to vote for somebody or to change who they're supporting, but to energize them to get out to vote at all. That's really important, mobilization, and that's particularly important when it's a non-presidential year like this year, and you know, we don't have a U.S. Senate race, for instance, on the ballot, right? And so those kind of things that might drive people to the polls, both candidates want to get their people excited to show up, or you don't have to show up, you can just do it from home, but they excited to cast the ballot.
Yeah. So, Stephen, I know you heard our discussion with Chip and myself beforehand. Where do you think that J.B. Pritzker is the most vulnerable? I mean, you heard me say that he's, sort of turned things around significantly, financially for the state. Where are his vulnerabilities tonight?
Being out of touch. I mean, I think that's the one thing Darren Bailey brings, is that he's somebody that people can identify with more readily than somebody like J.B. Pritzker. But I don't think that's enough. I mean, if you look at not just the WGN poll that you reported, Paul, from Emerson, but even the polls that are conducted by conservative PACs rarely have Bailey anywhere, within single digits. And so and I think the breakdown between the issues that matter to people was the most important thing that you pointed out. Darren Bailey is failing to change the agenda, to change the narrative to crime. He starts off by calling Chicago hellhole, and he does it more than once, right? And then, this notion of what it means to be somebody from Chicago and what that looks like. There's all kinds of problematic aspects to that, including the fact that it's racialized. So when you see that only 10% of the people in that poll said crime was the most important problem facing the state of Illinois, Darren Bailey's failing to control the narrative. When abortion's higher than that, and we see that 90% of people who are voting on abortion are going to vote for Pritzker, those are the kind of things where Pritzker wants to keep the attention, and I'm sure we'll see a lot of that tonight.
Now, Stephen, you said you're looking specifically for fireworks. I'm questioning, though, one specific candidate, both candidates, because Darren Bailey has certainly made a few more big splashes than Governor Pritzker leading up to tonight, whereas Pritzker has played it a little closer to the vest. Certainly he's latched onto some of the comments, some of the controversy there, but he himself hasn't really come out with guns blazing at this point against his Republican challenger.
If I were advising Governor Pritzker, and I'm not, but if I were advising Governor Pritzker, I'd tell him to stay away from it, and especially during the live debates. He can let his campaign advertisements do some of that work, but the best thing that Governor Pritzker can do is look like a governor. Look like the mature person in the room. Look like the person who not only got Illinois through a pandemic, but was a national leader with respect to responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think that those are the kind of things, that kind of presence J.B. Pritzker has because he's the incumbent. And because, as Paul mentioned, there's a lot about going on in Illinois, especially economically, that was better than when he took over. He should focus on those things, his accomplishments, what he plans to do in the future. So I don't think that those fireworks ought to be coming primarily from J.B. Pritzker. But if you're Darren Bailey, especially because you're behind in the polls, and you're not an incumbent, you got to go for that. You got to give people a reason to question J.B. Pritzker's leadership and competence. So
you expect some harsher criticism, some more power, fire, whatever you want to call it, from Darren Bailey, and that Pritzker will just let it fly right by him, that he won't engage in those moments.
I don't want to predict that. I mean, it's difficult when those things are coming at you not to fight back, especially if you have strong feelings about those things. And so what I'm saying is that I think that the best strategy for Governor Pritzker would be to try to move on, direct the conversation, talk about leadership. But I don't know for sure. I mean, it's tough, some of the things that are being said, people calling each other liars. I mean, these are some harsh words here. Yeah. And so I don't know if J.B. Pritzker will get drawn in, but he ought to be careful not to, is what I would suggest.
And by the way, Stephen, you mentioned the pandemic, and it's almost as though some people have kind of forgotten about that. I'm sure we'll hear about this tonight because Pritzker provided the leadership he provided. People had issues with it, but one of the people that had the most issue was Darren Bailey, who sued Pritzker in the state because he didn't want to wear a mask and all those things. I mean, so what is your sense of the way viewers will watch this tonight? Now the pandemic, not completely behind us, but we are where we are today. Do you think people are more likely to stand with Pritzker saying, look, he did the best he could, he tried to make the right decisions, or stand with Bailey saying, hey, this was about our freedom and Pritzker interfered with our freedom?
Right. I mean, I would imagine that Bailey, if the Bailey campaign was smart, they would have some focus groups on this, because I think downstate there's still people riled up, not about the pandemic specifically or about masks specifically, but about what that represents. That represents big government infringing on our freedoms. Those are things that are going to play well in parts of the state where Darren Bailey already has a lot of support. The question is, what's going to happen in the suburbs of Chicago? What's going to happen in the collar areas of Cook County, for instance? Are folks there going to be attentive to that? My thought is that they probably would not be receptive to criticisms on that front. I mean, it's going to be very difficult, especially now when it doesn't feel like we're in such an oppressive environment, to really make that stick. And so, I mean, I'm sure they got some focus group information and they've tested it, but it would surprise me if Darren Bailey made a big deal about that. I think he'll mention it because again, you're not only playing to the moderates, to people who may be independent, but you're playing to your base as well. You got to make sure to get them excited. So he may talk about freedom and government interference and those types of things, but I don't know how well that's going to stick.
Okay, I've got both of you here with me, so I'm going to ask you both a question, and I'll start with Paul. So Stephen, don't go anywhere. We'll come right back to you. But we have a second debate on the schedule, and not too far away. Do you think that that is playing into the strategy that these candidates are going to employ in tonight's debate?
I'm not sure how it would play in. I mean, you're absolutely right that on the 18th there will be the next debate that takes place right here in our WGN studios. But from the viewer standpoint, you know, look, when I came in, I think there were people outside who think the candidates are here tonight in our studios, and they're not. So generally, I think the question is going to be more put on the moderators. Taman, I'm guessing, will be a moderator of both. But when it comes here on the 18th, most likely going to be probably Micah Mater. I think you're going to see different issues addressed. I mean, part of what they need to be thinking about from a moderator standpoint, what issues do we want to address tonight in Bloomington Normal? By the way, they're on a college campus, so there may be some issues about, you know, loans and student issues and young people issues. When they come here to WGN on the 18th, we may see a shift in those issues. I'm not privy. I did not ask to see the questions that they're being asked tonight, so I have no idea.
You didn't ask?
Well, I didn't ask. I want to be able to talk to you freely and knowing the truth, and that also allows me afterwards to just go, I would have never asked that.
That's right. If you don't know in advance, it's easier to criticize.
Right.
Stephen, how about you? Do you think that these candidates are going to employ a little bit of strategy because they know there's another debate right around the corner?
Again, from Pritzker's perspective, I wouldn't. I would sort of stick with the message. For Bailey, he might hold back a little bit and think he can come up, you know, be a little safer and then come with more fireworks if he needs to the next time. I'm interested, you know, first of all, let's remember what we're doing here. I think the three of us are old enough to remember a time when everybody voted on one day, on Election Day, and then campaigns then would structure their messages, structure their strategies around moving toward Election Day. That's not what's happening now. People are already voting, right? People are voting by mail. Early voting is going to open up soon. And so you're not able to, as a campaign manager, to sort of direct your attention exactly in that way. I don't know tonight. I didn't hear, maybe you two can enlighten me about the format. Will audience members be able to, did they submit questions, or is it only the moderators? Will they be able to ask questions personally, or were they submitted in advance? What's that going to look like? Because I think that makes a difference in how the candidates come off if they're engaging with voters or just the media folks.
Yeah, I think, Stephen, the effect of I don't think we're getting questions from the audience. They're there, and I think that's going to, as you guys have talked about, the firepower and all of that, I think it's going to energize the candidates. They're going to have reactions from the crowd, although I imagine the crowd will be told to, you know, sit quietly. But no, the questions are going to come from the moderators, and I don't believe there's any plans to take any audience questions. It's only an hour, and so I know that the anchors or the moderators have enough questions that they want to ask to walk through it. Let me ask you, Stephen, too, about, you mentioned Chicago and you know, how Bailey not only repeated the accusations, but kind of has doubled down on his Chicago attacks. Listen, he must have a campaign. I'm guessing he's got a campaign advisor that somehow is telling him that's the right thing to do, and he should go after it. But if you were him tonight, because even when he was asked to kind of explain it, it was his chance to go, hey, it's not what I meant. We love Chicago. What is your thought? Should he at some point back out of his Chicago attacks and talk about his love for the city?
That'd be a dramatic shift. I don't know that he can talk about his love for the city, but I think he should back off of it a little bit, right? I mean, he's putting his eggs in this basket, right? The people who actually live in Chicago, almost none of them are going to cast a ballot for him anyway, so that's sort of fine. The folks who live further downstate and has a good rapport with them already, they're probably going to mostly cast. That's your reliable 33 to 35% of Illinois voters. The question is what happens in the Chicago suburbs, and I don't know. You know, in the 1950s and 60s, we had white flight from cities to the suburbs. Suburbs were created because people felt like cities weren't where they wanted to live. That's not, I mean, we're not in that era though now. People live in the suburbs for a lot of different reasons. Many of them commute into the city for work and love the fact that they're able to do that, right? And so, and then other people are living in the city and commuting out to the suburbs to work. So if we're going to rely on old stereotypes, it's probably not going to work out very well. I think we have to figure out, you know, where's the modern voter in the suburbs in particular? How do they feel about Chicago? And you're seeing from the WGN poll, only 10% of the people across the state really think crime is something that we need to be talking about first and foremost.
I think it's sort of interesting, and I'll bet you Pritzker gets a jab in on this tonight, that Bailey has his Chicago location, his Chicago home, is at the, what it was, the John Hancock building. I don't think it has a name right now.
That's right.
But it's got an address.
It's got an address, but we certainly know what it is. But my point is, you know, remember when Jane Byrne years ago moved into Cabrini Green as a way of saying I'm relating to the people? And of course the answer was, you know what, Mayor, the way you're living in Cabrini Green is probably not the way the people in Cabrini Green are living there. But it's sort of interesting that Bailey, if he wants to relate to Chicago and connect more, as you just said, he certainly connects downstate, but wants to connect with people. I'm not sure that the formerly known as Hancock building was the place to go.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think that the angle was different than the Jane Byrne trick. I think we can call it. It was a gimmick, right? Different than that. I heard Bailey sort of saying, I'm going to keep my eye on and I'm going to know more about crime in Chicago because I'm sort of living in the city. But you're right. We're talking, you know, that neighborhood is not the neighborhood. There's crime in every neighborhood. That's not what I'm saying. But I think that he's making that choice as a symbolic gesture, but I don't think it's the kind of gesture that is going to win very many people over. And if anything, it may lose him some support. Why are you spending money in the city? Why are your dollars going toward the city for the folks who really support him in other areas of the state?
And what sense do you have as well? You know, Chip and I talked before about the various Republican governors we've had. It's not just Bruce Rauner, who was more urban and city, but we did have the guy from Kankakee, George Ryan, and Jim Edgar. How open do you think the state is today to essentially bringing in a farmer, forget Bailey per se, but a farmer from Southern Illinois and making him governor? Is it a doable thing?
I had such nostalgia a moment ago when you mentioned Judy Bart Topinka. I hadn't thought about Judy Bart Topinka in so long, but you're right. She was a very popular. I had several students that worked for her, interned for her, and she was very popular. And of course, you know, statewide, you can win as a Republican in Illinois on the right issues and in the right office. I think in this moment right now, given what happened on January 6th in 2021, given that Trump is a presence in this election as he is in every single election this year, this is not the time that Illinois voters would decide to put a Republican in. But I would say looking forward, it's absolutely not impossible, especially somebody who, as you suggested, might be fiscally conservative, but is very progressive on social issues. I think that's somebody that would have a chance to be competitive in Illinois.
Well, Stephen Caliendo, professor of political science at North Central College, thank you so much for joining Paul and myself for a little bit of pre-debate analysis. I'm sure we will see you again in the near future. So until then, we bid you adieu and happy debate watching.
Thank you, my friend.
It's great to see you both. It's great to see you both.
You too.
Take
Excellent.
care.
So that said, we are now about 1 minute away from the debate. And before I turn things over to the debate, it's important to say, anybody that is watching this on Facebook or on YouTube, we will be ending this live stream. So we will not be carrying the debate on our social media channels, but I have the link in for the story. So start clicking now to pop over there so you can catch the full debate. Paul, in these last 35 seconds or go, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I want to make some popcorn and get ready for a very exciting hour. I don't know how many minds are going to be changed, but we'll be talking about it a lot in the coming days. And boy, there's the amazing scene that's coming up with a crowd.
That is, that's a live picture from Braden Auditorium down at Illinois State University, Normal, Illinois. I will say my alma mater, so shout out to the Redbirds down there. Yes, thank you very much.
Congratulations.
I can see Tamana's seat. We even see the candidates on the stage, and so we are just seconds away from the debate underway. And again, if you're on our social media, Facebook or YouTube, wherever you are across the state of Illinois, even if it's your local station's social media, flip over to your local station's website or TV channel, and you will be able to catch this debate there. Of course, all of them in the Next Star family. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night, and I hope it is a great debate.
Good night, everybody.
Facing together. Our governor is ripping people off. Our governor is pushing small business and the people out of the state.
Crime, abortion rights,
But we are not going back.
education, and the economy. These are the top issues facing Illinoisans statewide. Will voters give Chicago Democrat J.B. Pritzker another 4 years in office?
We have to elect pro-labor,
pro-choice, pro-voting rights, pro-civil rights candidates.
Or will downstate Republican Darren Bailey take over the governor's mansion?
The political elites and their self-dealing have had their way for far too long.
It's time for you to decide. Live from the campus of Illinois State University and Nexstar, your local election headquarters, the Illinois Governor's Debate starts now.
We are coming to you live from the Braden Auditorium on the campus of Illinois State University here in Normal for the Illinois Governor's Debate. Good evening.